Hey top percenters, Red Joey here. Today covering some of the English XY cards. Now, I know for a fact that pre-releases have not started yet, but we've already managed to get our hands on some of the English scans for some of our cards coming up in the X and Y set. Two cards worth mention are Yveltal and Xerneas, the ones from the half deck in Japan. It seems like I was saying in our last episode, I wasn't sure whether the half deck cards would be put into our XY set or would go into our XY2. It seems that they've actually been brought forward slightly, they're actually coming out in X and Y. So anyone who's looking forward to Xerneas or Yveltal coming from the half decks, you get them straight away. But right now, those aren't the cards I want to focus on. I want to focus on three cards in particular. Three trainer item cards. Once again, these cards are actually from the half deck, and each one of them has their own merit, so that's why I'm giving them the time. So let's start off with our trainer supporter card, Shauna. Shauna is basically a sized down Professor Oak's new theory. When you play Shauna from your hand, shuffle your hand into your deck and draw 5 cards. Now compared to a card like N, where you draw cards until you have the same number in hand as you do prizes, Shauna does seem a little lacking in the early game. Turn 1, turn 2, you play N, you're drawing 6. But as the game continues, the advantage that N can net you gets less and less. In your mid-game, you're most likely only going to be drawing 3 or 4 cards with N, whereas Shauna stays at a set 5. In your late game, N will grab you 1 or 2. Shauna grabs you 5. It all depends on how much you value that one extra card in your early game, on whether you think Shauna's a better card. I could compare Shauna to something like Juniper, but I'm pretty sure that we've all been there where you have to play an early game Juniper and you have 1 or 2 supporters still in hand, or you've got a pretty much unplayable hand. You can't really afford to sit there and wait to draw into N, or a card that gets you into N, so you have to use Juniper straight away to try and get yourself up and running, potentially throwing away cards that would be valuable in your mid to late game. And I could also compare Shauna to Colrus. Colrus, in my opinion, is the opposite of N. Colrus in your early game, you'll be grabbing a couple of cards. You may only be grabbing 3 or 4, depending on how desperate you were when you were using the Colrus and how well you and your opponent have managed to set up before using Colrus. Colrus itself can actually net bigger hands than, well, any other card in the game. Colrus can draw you in potential up to 10 cards, but that means that both you and your opponent are setting up pretty well. If you're dominating the game with a full bench, you're going to be drawing 5 for yourself. You might only draw 2 or 3 off your opponent, so that's 6 or 7 there. Well, that's 7 or 8 cards there. But the problem with that is that you can't really rely on a card like Colrus if you're losing, and if your opponent has decided they want to play a minimal game. If your opponent knows that you like using Colrus, they're not going to absolutely splurge and splash everything onto their bench. They're going to play a very minimalistic game. They're going to keep numbers low. We've seen this happen when the Plasma Absol became popular. When people were playing Plasma Absol, if your opponent knew it was in your deck, they would play with the bare minimum on their bench. They wouldn't give you the extra damage output. The same can be said for Colrus. If people know that you're going to be relying on Colrus at any point, they'll try and play a minimalistic game. They won't overextend, they won't slap everything onto the bench. And with that, your opponent is controlling your draw output with Colrus. With Shauna, there's no controlling factor. There's no taking prizes, there's no how many Pokemon on our bench, it's just shuffle in, draw 5. And it's stable. It's a guaranteed number, it's a number that you can work with throughout the entire game. In your early game, Shauna gets you 5. In your mid game, Shauna gets you 5. And in your late game, Shauna grabs you 5. It's a constant, stable number that you can always work with. And to be honest, I think that people are going to play Shauna. It's not a bad card. If Shauna doesn't see much play in the future, I'm going to be incredibly surprised because, well, as I've been saying, it is a powerful card. As I've been saying, it is a consistent number to work with. A shuffle draw for 5 isn't bad. We used to all play Professor Oak's New Theory, and that was shuffle draw for 6. Is drawing one card after a shuffle really that big of a deal? Sure, that extra card means more options, but when you compare it to other things in format, it's a stable number. It's probably one of the most stable draw supporters we have that doesn't have a cost. And as such, I can see Shauna being an amazing card to have. But enough rambling about that, let's get on to our next 2 cards. And I'll start with the first of our 2 new stadiums. I give you Fairy Garden. Now, despite the incredibly effeminate name, Fairy Garden is an amazing card in my opinion. It is a stadium that allows Pokemon with Fairy Energy attached to have free retreat. Now, we've seen it in the past with Darkrai and Dark Cloak that free retreat in a specific type of deck is a powerful tool to have. It means that you don't have to burn energy to retreat, you don't have to rely on Switch or Escape Rope. It's a case of, here's my energy, free retreat. And to be honest, it's absolutely amazing with fairies. They already have Fairy Trance. They already have Fairy Transfer, which is effectively Hydreigon's Dark Trance for Fairy Energy. So you have Aromatisse down, you have 1 Fairy Energy on your board. Whatever you have active has free retreat. That's all of it. It has free retreat. Nothing more, nothing less. But free retreat can be amazing. You can look at Xerneas. It has a retreat cost of 2. Fairy Garden, Fairy Energy. Oh, it can run away for free now. If it survives a hit, it can run to the bench, it can keep itself safe. And mostly I like this card just because it's a utility card. It is amazing for it. Any kind of card that turns around and says, here's utility, here's how to actually keep yourself alive, here's how you keep yourself going. Yeah, I'm going to pick that card up, and seeing as Fairy has a lot of support, seeing as Fairy does have access to Xerneas X, it does have Sweet Veil, it has Fairy Transfer, it has immunity. You know, it has immunity, free retreat, energy manipulation, and something that can swing for decent numbers. So, yeah, I think the free retreat has kind of turned around and said, fairies are going to be a thing, they're definitely going to be big. And now they're going to be incredibly versatile as well. I won't be surprised if Xerneas X becomes a real big thing to get rid of. But now let's move on to our 3rd and final trainer card from the XY set. We have Shadow Circle. Once again, just like the other 2 cards, this has actually been brought forward from the half decks that are getting released on January 21st in Japan. Not 21st, sorry, January 31st in Japan. And as if Dark didn't already have enough support, they now have access to 0 weakness. Any Pokemon that has dark energy attached to it while Shadow Circle is in play has no weakness. So, Darkrai and how it used to fear big basics? Not anymore. Here's Shadow Circle. Here's a dark energy. Your big basic fighting guy, your Terrakion, your Landorus, your Terrakion X or Landorus X even, they now just hit for the basic numbers. They don't hit Darkrai for weakness anymore. And to be honest, big basics was probably Darkrai Garbodor's one big auto loss. And it doesn't have that anymore, does it? Because they're not hitting you for weakness, they don't get those key one-shots that they need. They're not able to place 100. Next turn, finish you off while accelerating energy. And this is huge in itself. The fact that Dark already had its own set back at the beginning of the X era. When Dark Explorers came out, they got Darkrai, they got Sableye, they got Dark Claw, Dark Patch, they got Hydreigon, the set later. They got absolutely everything they needed. And then the sets have come out, they've got even more tools to work with. They've got Bicycle, they've now got Red Card, they're going to have their hands on roller skates, they're going to now have Shadow Circle. This set, there are so many. This stadium on its own turns around and says, Darks get even more of a boost. The fact that it's coming out in X and Y, where we get roller skates, Yveltal X, and now Shadow Circle, Darkrai variants and Darkrai Sableye variants are getting huge boost from the set, and that's why I felt it was worth mentioning Shadow Circle. Conversely, Shadow Circle can help your opponent, but your opponent has to be running Dark Energy. It's the same with Fairy Garden. Your opponent has to be running Fairy Energy to get that free retreat. Another thing I think deserves mention before I actually sign off on this episode, though, is the whole fact that 2 out of 3 of these new cards that I've mentioned are stadiums. And people have already turned around and said that, oh, Tropical Beach is a huge thing. Well, now that we've got these stadiums, Tropical Beach isn't as huge. We've got more relevant stadiums in play now to actually play to counter Tropical Beach. So if you're not running Hypnotoxic Laser, for whatever reason, then you're not going to be running Verbank. So if you're not running Verbank, you don't really have a Tropical Beach counter. Now we have a Tropical Beach counter for Darks, we have a Tropical Beach counter for Fairy. Plasma already had Frozen City, meaning, once again, another Tropical Beach counter. The way I see it is, once X and Y hits, Tropical Beach isn't going to be as viable as it was. Sure, people can argue that as long as the person who wants to use Tropical Beach gets it for that one turn, they're fine. But I've never ever seen someone go, here's Tropical Beach, replenish my hand, that's all I'll ever need Beach for now. It's always been a case of, Beach, replenish my hand. Spend more cards. Oh, I'm not quite set up yet. Beach, replenish my hand again. And people only see it as an early game card. There are times in your there are times in your mid to late game where Tropical Beach is a case of, instead of attacking, I'm going to replenish my hand to give myself more options for later. If my opponent doesn't end me, I'm golden. And the person would either get end or they're golden. Simple enough. When you're running the idea that your opponent's already used 2 or 3 ends, they've only got at most 1 left, then you can go Tropical Beach, replenish my hand, next turn I'll have the resources to go off and seal this game off. So if your opponent goes turn 1 Tropical Beach, you can now go Shadow Circle, or Fairy Garden, or Verbank. All of a sudden, Tropical Beach doesn't become that mid to late game option. And unless your opponent's running 3 or 4 Tropical Beach, they're not going to get much use out of it. And to me, I think that's a huge thing in this game right now. Tropical Beach has become a huge card, and we've got 2 more cards that can effectively counter it, and they go into relevant decks. Fairy is going to see some play. If Fairy doesn't have a huge explosion in the first tournament season after X and Y, I'm going to be hugely surprised. I don't think that in testing Fairy's going to be a bad deck. It just has too much going for it. And Darkrai variants in general, they've always been huge. Shadow Circle just gives them even more. And Dark decks don't like turning around and saying, oh, I don't want to make use of more resources, I don't want to actually have more options. Less options, please. It's like, no, they want as many options as they can have. That's why Dark decks keep on thriving. With all of that said, though, I'm going to sign off on this episode. What do you guys think about the new trainers in X and Y? Fairy Garden? Shadow Circle? Shauna? Do any of these cards appeal to you? If they do, or even if they don't, let me know down below. And until next time, I've been Joey. You guys are the top percent. Peace.